Nope. All right, welcome everybody. It is Wednesday, May 5th, 2021, and it's 9:41, and you are at a Wausau Waterworks Commission meeting at Wausau City Hall. Thank you and welcome. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of April 13th and April 20th, 2021. I would entertain a motion. Motion by Jean. A second. Second by Herbst. I do know that we have yes, Mr. Robinson.
I have a correction on page 2. Right before paragraph 3, it deals with the American Rescue Plan.
Mm-hmm.
The last sentence reads the city will receive, it should be the county. And the total for, in delete, replaces the city with the county, and then after million, delete the goal and 4. And the total for Marathon County is just under 52 million. I provided those to Gina. So I would move to amend to correct the minutes to reflect that the county will receive 26 million and total for Marathon County would be just under 52 million.
Okay. I guess that's an amendment to the minutes. Do we need to second that one? Okay. All right. All those in favor of the minutes as amended can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. We're set there. All right. We're moving on to item number 2, Director's Report on the Utility Operations. I'm going to pass this over to you, Eric.
Updates on the drinking water facility and wastewater facility updates are in there as well. LSL funding. So I don't know if any of the commissioners have any specific questions on any of the items on here. Dave's not here today, but I will try to answer them as best I can. Any specifics?
Mr. Jean.
I'm interested in the changes to our general permit for the water, but I'm going to do some homework and we'll talk about it later. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? All right. I guess we will move on to item number 3, discussion and possible action regarding the purchase of a half-ton pickup. Quotes opened at the 4/27/21 Board of Public Works meeting. Staff recommends the purchase of a vehicle from Fred Miller, GMC. I guess I would entertain a motion. Motion by Herb, second by Robinson. Any discussion here? Or any?
GMC trucks, we have others?
We do have other GMs. We don't have GMCs. Typically, they've been higher priced than other providers from the city before, or other vendors in the city before. We're actually pretty excited about this one. All 3 vehicles meet spec. This one has a couple of additions or other options included that make it more attractive, and it is the lowest price.
Any other comments? All right, all of those in favor of approving the purchase of the half-ton pickup from Fred Miller GMC can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? All right, that passes. Thank you very much. We are now moving on to item number 4, discussion and possible action partnering with WPS on the proposed solar array at 1010 Bugbee Avenue. Maybe before we have a motion or anything, we have a presentation, so why don't we hit that first? Welcome.
You want to come up, Kelly? And Dave are here, and there's a couple people also on the phone. So, Kelly, if you want to introduce them, and we can get started. Thanks.
Sure. Will this just move me ahead?
Nope.
Will not?
No.
Or do we just say, next slide, please?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll have to advance that.
Okay,
Sorry.
great.
I gotta share my screen here.
One moment.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Kelly Zagzewski. I'm with Wisconsin Public Service. I have a number of folks that are joining me today to talk to you a little bit about a potential partnership. We're pretty excited to be here and at least being able to have this conversation. It's this first opportunity that we've had within Wisconsin Public Services territory to even talk about this kind of a partnership. So thank you very, very much for agreeing to chat with us and spend some time with us and hear a little bit about our proposal. I do have a whole gamut of folks, and my philosophy is when I come to visit with municipalities, I want you to get the answers that you're asking right away and not have to wait. So that's why there's a bunch of people joining me. Today, Aaron and Jeff are actually on the phone. They're calling in from Milwaukee, and they're going to take us through this partnership, okay? So, guys, are you there?
Jeff Barr is here.
Thank you, Jeff. Is Aaron with you today?
He's on the call, but not with me physically.
Okay, great. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys, and if you want to walk us through this presentation and just kind of indicate when you want them to move forward on the slide. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any slides right now.
One moment.
One moment, please.
He's on the WebEx, correct? This is Aaron we're talking?
Yeah.
Jeff is talking.
This is Jeff.
Okay.
Are you seeing?
I'm seeing that she's sharing content, but all I'm seeing is a black screen.
That's fun.
All right,
If, although if you had the presentation in front of you, you could maybe share it?
Yeah, you have it,
Jeff?
I do.
Okay, maybe we should do that. If
See
we,
if I can.
yeah, we'll stop sharing and he can share it. And there's a share button kind of in the middle at the bottom of your WebEx. All right, we're seeing it. Thank you.
All right.
We're going to make it.
Well, as Kelly said with your introductions, my name is Jeff Clark. I'm a market strategist. I've been with WEC Energy Group in some way, shape, or form for the last 30 years. And Aaron and I recently have started to take over a lot of our distributed generation interconnection projects. And when we were asked to come here, we were looking at what we might be able to do with the Waterworks, similar to programs that we have in place for Wisconsin Electric. What we were looking to do as far as our partnership is to use our combination of our WPS Naturewise Renewable Energy Program, which basically allows you to make a bold commitment to environmental stewardship. It allows you to purchase energy through our Naturewise program, which comes from safe, locally sourced wind, biogas, and solar projects. It's an affordable way to invest in a sustainable future with no need to make significant changes or purchase equipment. Joining Naturewise helps to reduce your reliance on fossil fuels, cut down on greenhouse gas emissions, preserve resources for future generations, earn leadership in energy and environmental design certification points, and support the continued production expansion of local renewable energy sources. Now, how would the Naturewise Renewable Energy Program work for the City of Wausau Waterworks Commission? Essentially, WPS would enter into a land lease with Wausau Waterworks for development of a 1 megawatt or larger solar field based upon the land that you were looking at purchasing for the field. The lease term of the facility would be at least the life of this facility with the potential of expanding the lease and/or take care of the facility decommissioning. The land lease negotiated terms would be similar to terms that we have in place for other solar facilities that are interconnecting to the distribution system. WPS would work with the developer on the engineering, procurement, and construction of the full solar facility. We would own the solar facility within the Naturewise Renewable Energy Program. We would operate and maintain the solar facility and be responsible for ongoing operation and maintenance costs through the life of the project using utility best practices. Now, how does the Naturewise program that we're talking about here and combining with the leasing of the facility work relative to owning the solar field? From a capital expense perspective, if you own it, you're going to have that capital outlay to actually build the facility. Under the Naturewise program that we're talking about here today, you wouldn't. From a contract management perspective, you would have the contract management with the developer while it's being constructed, and then also managing any O&M agreements that you might have for maintaining the facility going on in the future. Under the Naturewise program, you wouldn't have to worry about managing those contracts. Tax credit benefit. As it stands currently, with you being a public entity, you would not be able to take advantage of the existing tax credits for building the facility, while under the Naturewise program, since we would be building and owning it, we would be able to take advantage of those tax credits, and then that benefit rolls into our utility rates to help keep those costs down. O&M obligation, again, if you have ownership of the facility, you're going to have the budget to maintain the facility for the next 20, 30 years. Under the Naturewise program, we would be responsible for the O&M costs. Lease revenue, if you own the facility, you have the property that it's on, you wouldn't have any lease revenue associated with the property. Under the Naturewise program, where we're owning the facility, we would be leasing the land back from you and be paying you that lease payment. Matching the load profile. One of the things that we're looking at is how best to match the load requirements or load profile of the Waterworks. With a larger solar facility, you're getting that production during the day, you're not getting it at night. And I believe that your overall peak load is less than a megawatt, so there would be times when the facility is generating electricity on a nice, hot, sunny summer day where you would not be able to take full advantage of that production. Under the Naturewise program, you're essentially buying blocks of renewable energy to meet your requirements, so it really does kind of match up with your load profile, and there's no issue with you not being able to get the value of the Naturewise energy because you would be buying it and getting the credit for that. As far as the estimated costs to the Waterworks Commission, what we are proposing is that the Wausau Waterworks would enter into a contract under the Naturewise tariff for roughly the annual output of the solar facilities, depending on the size of the facility that actually can be constructed on the land. We're projecting somewhere in the area of about 2 million kilowatt hours per year. I think that kind of matches up with what was presented last month from the folks on Sunvest on what they were looking at as far as how big of an array could go on that on the property. Our suggested term would be for 20 years because we're kind of looking at it to match up similarly to what we do with our programs with Wisconsin Electric. The current rate for the Naturewise program is a payment of $2.40 per 100 kilowatt hours that you're contracting for per month. or basically a premium of 2.4 cents per kilowatt hour. If we do the full 2 million kilowatt hours, our projection is that cost would be about $48,000 to the Wausau Waterworks. So the net cost actually to the Waterworks would be the $48,000 less whatever the land lease payment ends up to be based upon our negotiations. So the next steps that we would be looking at, one would be to enter into a notice of interest in leasing the property where we would talk about the term, the rate, and then any escalators on the lease payments over the period of time that we'd be looking to have the lease in place. Typically speaking, we tend to look to get a minimum of 30 years on a lease with an option to extend it after the initial lease period is over. We'd also look for a notice of interest in the Naturewise program. Again, we'd be looking for about a 20-year minimum commitment from the water utility, and then after that 20-year period, you could extend that contract with Naturewise. And then we would look to execution of both commitments, both the lease agreement and the Naturewise program enrollment contract. Kind of going here for any questions that you may have, and hopefully we'll be able to provide you with all your answers.
Awesome, thank you. I know we have questions. Who wants to start?
I do want to make one more introduction. I apologize. Dave Schneider is joining us today. Dave is our senior project manager, or I'm sorry, senior service manager. Dave manages all of the largest accounts throughout northern Wisconsin up to the Michigan border. City of Wausau is one of his customers, so just introducing him just because some of your questions, I may call him up, just so you know who he is. So we're ready for questions.
Question.
Yes, Mr. Force.
First observation, delighted to see WPS moving into renewable energy. Just as a citizen and a ratepayer, happy to see that move by you. Have you done this anywhere else?
This is the first project of this type because the utilities are, the Class A utilities are on a tariff. They're set up a little bit differently. So our tariff through Wisconsin Public Service, through the Public Service Commission, we have not had this opportunity that has come up for us to be able to do it. So this is the first of this type of partnership. We've either built or operated solar farms, wind generation, biodigesters throughout Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, and Kansas, but never a partnership like this directly with a entity.
Would we have any references on where you've built solar and operated solar?
Sure. Two Creeks, which is located over by Two Rivers. Badger Hollow's just getting prepared to go become commissioned. We just announced a fairly large project in Dane County. So I'd be happy to show you those things, Jim, or if you want to.
I'm speaking on behalf of the commission.
Sure.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mr. Robinson.
So our annual,
I don't think
I'm
it's
not
on.
sure that works, John.
I don't think
is
it's on.
our,
Is it on? I don't know if
it's turned on, but I'm not sure it's.
I can hear it. Maybe it just needs to be a little closer to you.
The $48,000 annual cost, that is for the system, or is that your anticipated electric cost for the city based on our current utilization?
That would be the cost for Naturewise. That is on top of the general cost, the electric cost for the facility. Dave, did you want to add to that?
So right now, you guys are on what's called a CG20 rate, and adding the Naturewise program increases your cost by 2.4 cents per kilowatt hour. And you buy 100 kilowatt hour blocks of Naturewise. And as part of this agreement, we would ask that the city purchase enough Naturewise blocks to amount to all of the new load for the drinking water site, so. In essence, you guys can say that you're 100% green at your drinking water site at that point. That power would actually be sent to the grid and used within the Naturewise program. Also, we're not opposed to adding additional accounts to the agreement as well. For example, you guys have a number of well sites. We could also include those into the package as well, where we could say that in the future, all of the water well sites are now 100% green as well, because as long as we have enough solar area to offset the drinking water site and the well sites, we can, in essence, say that we're 100% green at that point.
So how does the 2.4 cents per kilowatt hour compare to our current rate?
But that's where that $48,000 figure comes in. That is what makes that up, that 2.4 cents. So that's above and beyond what you guys normally pay.
So we would have the land, and then for going green, let me just try to simplify it as much as I can. So for going green, we would have a surcharge of $48,000 for using the Naturewise program.
Yeah, but you have to take the $48,000 and you have to you have to subtract the lease payment that we're paying you guys on the property that the solar farm would be on.
So we would own the property, we would lease it to you?
That's correct. And we'll make monthly payments to you guys
As a lease for the property?
for the property, yeah.
So that would offset some of the 48,000 in costs? I'm sorry, John, I didn't mean to jump in here.
But no, you're absolutely right. That's exactly right. So be careful with that $48,000. It's just a mark in time here, okay?
Eric, is Clark Beach done an estimate of what our kilowatt cost would be based upon our owning and installing the solar panels ourselves?
They've done the capital cost,
You did a
John.
capital cost.
Yeah.
I'm asking the question of the operational. I think what we have to do is, my concern is that I'm intrigued by the idea, but our due diligence to the ratepayers is to look at Naturewise and WPS versus our own ownership. What is our cost? It's best we can calculate using a proforma, to proforma with one, proforma with another, and compare the cost over the 20 years, 30 years of the life of the system. So is there any way for us to estimate what our cost would be to produce a kilowatt hour incorporated capital and operational cost for our ownership of a system?
Yes, there is. Yep.
So we would need that for a comparative analysis, and I'm not adverse, I'm not saying no, but I think we have that obligation going forward to just do that comparison. So would that require additional, I think we have to really understand the WPS proposal, and that would require additional discussions with them to figure out what the value of our land is from a lease perspective, where the Naturewise credits or costs come in versus our doing the install, and how soon can we have that up and operational, and what's the lifetime, and building in both those capital and operation and maintenance costs. So is that part of our contract with Clark Beach?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And I know that they have been looking at the O&M costs from the last meeting that we had that they made a presentation on. They've been looking into that. I haven't received a solid number back from them yet on an annual, what the annual cost would be.
I see Mr. Forrest chomping at the bit.
No, these are all great questions. I think, though, that we would be best to use our time with WPS and Naturewise this morning to ask questions specific to your proposal. Obviously, we're going to have lengthy discussion evaluating our options here at some point, John. I'm intrigued by this around 2 million kilowatt hours for 12 months. I think we were led in our last presentation to believe that the solar facility would provide around 57% of the estimated load for the new water plant, exclusive of wells. And are you on board with that number, or is there something else here that I'm missing?
I think there were two options, right?
I think it's a little bit different. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what WPS is offering us is that, we're going to generate as much power as we can from the field that is built.
And that goes back to the grid?
That will go back to the grid. And then we will purchase, what we need for the facility. And, our grid may not, provide all of that, if that makes sense. It might be from some of their other fields that they're putting on the grid. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
Okay. So it is a little bit different. I mean, initially, when we started this, we had talked about building a facility, hopefully a megawatt facility, and whatever that generated, we would use. If there was excess, it would go either back to the grid or just not get used. And now I think we're, this is a little bit different, but.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that 2 million kilowatt hour number is very realistic in my mind. I just pulled up a 3-year history on the existing drinking water site, and that's pulling right now 1.7.
Okay.
So I can easily see it jumping up a little bit with the new site, so.
Okay.
Mr. Jean?
So that I understand it, we wouldn't be, if we went with your program, we wouldn't be investing any money. Is that correct?
That is correct. WPS would own, operate, maintain that site moving forward,
So all the work.
but not own the land, obviously.
Right. So we wouldn't be issuing any contracts?
No, even the engineering, it's going to be
basically-
done internally by WPS, by our people.
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to be sure I understood it that way. I'm still a little fuzzy about and Dave, you can help me sometime about this program, but it seems like a win-win, but we're not sure yet, I think.
Yeah, we can definitely discuss the details, further after this meeting. There are a lot of details here.
Mr. Forrest?
I assume you've looked at the Sunvest proposal, your competitor. Is there any difference in the installation time? Or are you folks pretty much on the same wavelength as the other
We have
proposal?
not talked with Sunvest, we have not.
Well, I don't think I would talk to it, but I just wondered if you were aware of their timeline, their construction timeline.
This is, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Jeff Clark.
Hi, Jeff.
I just wanted, we actually have a working relationship with Sunvest and have done quite a bit of work with them. So when I actually saw that Sunvest was the developer that you had been talking with, it actually made me fairly happy because we have a pretty good working relationship with Sunvest. And there's a very high probability that we would essentially use Sunvest to actually develop the project. So in a lot of respects, it would be Sunvest developing the project and kind of either you owning it or us owning it.
Gotcha, thanks.
What other questions? Mr. Force?
No, Mr. G?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Maybe a better way to look at it so that we know that, and our ratepayers know and understand it. How much would we pay, right, what is our power bill for the water plant now? 2,000 or 3,000 a month? Well, whatever it is, Dave, I'd like to see whatever we're paying now and what we'd be paying if we were under this program with you guys. That would be just a great way to, otherwise, it seems a little difficult to follow.
Yeah, Joe, I have a 3-year history here in front of me. And at the existing drinking water site, you guys are averaging about $10,000 to $12,000 a month.
So I would like to know what we would potentially be paying if we were under the program. And let's say it's $15,000 a month. And I know, and maybe you can't answer that right now, but at the new facility, okay?
Yeah, it'll all boil down to whatever we agree upon with that land lease agreement. That's going to have the biggest impact, so.
Mr. Robinson, yeah.
Do you have the kilowatt, average kilowatts per month
Um,
in your totals?
I don't, because right now, the rate that you guys are on, there's actually 2 components to it. There's a demand component, and then there's a kilowatt hour component. So you almost have to take your annual costs altogether and divide it out by the number of kilowatt hours to get your average. And I haven't done that, but we can certainly do that.
Yes.
You used to have a program that we would be shed our use of electricity, and we had to come up with another way to do it through a generator or whatever. I don't know if you still have that program, but I just make a comment, that saved the city of Wausau Waterworks a lot of money on water and wastewater, but I don't know if that's still a program.
Yep. Yeah, I know the exact program you're talking about, Joe. We do still have that program.
I think, like, if the commission were to take a look and move forward with this from your perspective, do you feel that the 22 construction time frame would still be okay?
Jeff, I'll let you speak to that.
Yes, I think that would still work well. So I was kind of reading the meeting minutes from when the gentleman or folks from Sunvest were talking, and I think we would be able to still maintain the time frame or the timeline they were looking at for construction of the facility.
Okay.
Are there other questions for our yes, Mr. Forrest?
I think you said this, the O&M costs would be yours. There would not be additional O&M fees to us.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
So do we need to direct staff to continue to work with WPS for the purposes of clarifying the agreement and terms and bring back that to us?
We can do that. Making sure that you have the information you need to make a decision, and I also,
Well, I would
Are
move-
you-
I would move that we direct staff to engage the Disconnection Public Service in developing a partnership for potential operation of a solar array field for providing electricity to the.
all right, we have a motion to move ahead with talking to WPS about a partnership for a solar array. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Forrest. Any discussion here? All right. Oh, yes, Mr. Robinson.
And consistent with that, Eric, when can we see that report from Clark Dietz relative to the cost so that we can see those about at the same time?
Yeah, I would set the expectation that it would be at our next meeting, so you could have a final decision by then.
Cool.
Okay.
All All right, all of those in favor of moving ahead with discussions on this partnership for solar, can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you so much. All right, next item on our agenda, discussion and possible action on options moving ahead with lead service replacement at citywide. Pass that over to you, Eric.
Yeah, so we have had a lot of discussion over the last 3 years, 4 years with regards to lead service line replacement. We have received some grant funding through the DNR. We have been doing 80 to 100 replacements annually. When we had talked previously at these meetings about, you know, how could we better do this, shorten the timeline on this, remove the lead quicker? What are some of the organizational type setups that we could do, and what are the options to us? And I had, you know, worked with our staff, Scott and Shannon, and put together a memo with really 3 options, and that isn't necessarily the only option. There could be some hybrids of these options. There could be, but this was really a starting point on a discussion on how we would like to see the organization go forward. We feel that from a regulatory standpoint, at some point in the near future, that we're going to be pushed to make this mandatory, that lead service lines will need to be removed from the system. And so I've kind of outlined the priorities on what staff is working on now, moving through, and then, but I would like a little bit of feedback, if it's not today, if it's next month or whatever it is, from the commission on exactly what your thoughts are on the options that you know I've put together. Anything particular stand out? You know, I think we really need to find some direction on what the avenues we're going to pursue here over the next 2 to 3 years, especially with the fact that there's potentially funding available to do this as well, to support the utility in doing this. I think having a structure in place might help when we apply for those funds and how we do this.
All right, Mr. Force?
Well, I applaud the city for recognizing this issue and moving in this direction. The statement that it would take 80-plus years to remove lead service lines from the city, and from a public health perspective, this is unacceptable. I applaud that statement. It is unacceptable, and I think we're bound to move at a quicker pace. What I wanted to ask about is if the utility performs the work and would have to hire 3 new employees, probably some new equipment, what would that cost be to the city? And if we anticipate federal or state or both financial assistance, would that cost be covered by any assistance we would receive? I don't know whether it's a crapshoot that the Biden infrastructure bill will be passed. I frankly think it will be on the negotiated basis that they have without any support from the other party. So I think money will be available. But I just wondered what that cost would be, and if that's the best approach, we would gain 5 years in replacing lead service lines by doing it ourselves. And I guess there's a correlative question. Would that harm a lot of local plumbing firms who are relying on this work for their financial success? I'm sorry, long question.
Yeah. So let me try it. So we had some revisions and stuff. So we, you know, just talking with Scott, and if we wanted to put a crew together, Scott and Shannon's recommendation would be we would need 4 FTEs, and it would be close to $2 million annually overall. And then, you know, we don't know exactly how the funding would take place. Would that just be for the replacement and construction, or would we be able to pay our own people's salaries with that? You know, I don't know what the restrictions on that funding would be, so I don't know all the details on that, but at least it would be for you know, the construction replacement of those lines, as well as our side. I hope that they would allow that, not just the private side. And what was the second half of the question, Jim?
It was politics, and I think,
I don't know that any of us knows the answer, but the likelihood that we're going to get some assistance.
yeah, and I guess, like, for me, the American Rescue Plan seems to point to this kind of a project, so it's something that we could suggest to use our part of the city's allocation. Again, the one concern is if it is an ongoing expense that we're paying for with this one-time money, although we're in the infrastructure that would be, you know, it'd be 100 years, right? So.
I think you asked about the local plumbers, Jim, and I think right now with the challenge that we have is we require the homeowners, obviously, to volunteer for the program, right? We provide them the information. They say,
Right.
yes, we want to participate, and then they have to go out and get the bids on their own. And they struggle with getting bids from plumbers. And so that's really a pinch point for us, you know, because I think there's other people that are interested. It's just, they never, you know, they make a few phone calls, but if nobody gets back to them, then they just kind of fall off the radar. They don't follow through, so,
I agree.
yeah, okay.
Is
Mr. Radlin, oh.
is there action required here? Yeah? Eric?
I don't think so unless you see something that's just glaring and you want to move forward. I put it on for action. Is there something you want to see different to dive in deeper on? Is there, but from my perspective, I wanted to show you what staff is possibly looking at, and if you're in support with pursuing, you know, something or a hybrid of these options, we'll continue to move down this path. We'll work with some other municipalities on how they've done it, and just continue to bring you information back, and maybe we can narrow it down.
I support what you have here. I think it's great.
Okay.
I saw Mr. Robinson getting ready to say something.
Well, it was just a question. You had indicated that under your utility performed work that it was 300 lines. Is it higher? Because you wouldn't achieve it in 15 years at a 300 per year basis.
Right, yeah, you're right. That's where I think we've run through a bunch of iterations when we were going through this with Shannon and Scott, and I might have some of these timelines hadn't been changed, so those might be some errors on my end, John, so I apologize for that. But
Is
you're.
it a higher number or a longer period?
A longer period, not a higher number of lead service lines, with one crew. I think 300 is probably challenging. We had calculated it out 7 months a year. That's 170 days or so of working days.
Yeah, it would take 708 and actually just about 709 replacements to get, to meet a 12-year schedule.
About 2 a day, better than 2 a day.
And that's all year. So you're gonna, we're blessed with extreme frost for about 4 months, 5
Yeah.
months of the year, which is gonna cut our production down considerably and drive our costs up if we want to challenge winter with these replacements. So we calculated it out, we'd probably looking at 7 to 8 months a year, depending on weather. Averaging 1.5 to 2 a day would be probably running good. I think 300 replacements is going to probably be fairly optimistic for a year.
Mr. James?
I think that 15 years would be more like 30, John.
How would you prioritize? Would you go through neighborhoods doing, you know, one after another down a block? Or would you be selective as to the sections of the city that you wanted to attack first?
If we did a mass program, it would be probably most cost beneficial to do them in block areas or in smaller bunched areas or groups within residential specific in the streets. So having a paving company come back and pave over one street is going to be more cost effective than doing patches all over the entire city.
Would we anticipate any resistance from homeowners?
Yeah, especially if there wasn't enough money to cover the entire private side,
Yeah.
you know, then absolutely. And I think that we would, it would be beneficial if the commission then would consider a mandatory replacement ordinance at the same time. You know, I think that with one crew trying to run 300 a year, it was the anticipation too that our street reconstruction projects, you know, we might be able to get some there too if we had a mandatory replacement, that could be done with those projects and not necessarily in-house, so. Because a lot of what's driving our street reconstruction projects right now is the utilities.
Right.
So those are some high priority areas.
You estimate the cost between $3,000 and $5,000 with the homeowner responsible for the remainder. What have we experienced as far as that remainder is concerned? I always thought 5,000 was a top number.
Have you seen?
It depends. Wausau was lucky,
Obviously, but-
Wausau was lucky enough to have the highest replacement cost for one lateral in the state. I think it was just over $18,000 or $19,000.
Whoa.
There was a considerable amount of rock, the way the driveway was situated, there was a lot of replacement and stuff like that. We're averaging, because we are giving the two numbers, 3,000 and 5,000, we're averaging about $4,500 for a replacement on the homeowner side. Cities like Milwaukee, Madison, they're coming in at just under $2,000. So we do have a little higher cost here.
But our experience would be that 3 to 5 would cover most.
Correct.
Thanks.
Mr. Jean?
Have you considered the, since we're in the same trench as typically the sewer lateral, is that, are we digging them, or are we trying to push them through or pull them through to avoid that, or is that an incentive that we'll open up the trench, and if you want to replace the sewer lateral, you'll be at, you just have, it's just a timing issue?
The funding right now for the private side laterals cannot include sewer, but the plumbers are doing most of the sewers along with them at an extra cost to the homeowner.
And I guess my reason for asking that question is that there still would be plenty of work with the private side, not only with that, but we always refrain from doing any plumbing in somebody's basement, or to minimize our risk if that failed in the future, that we would be sued for it. So I still think it's probably going to be a nightmare of coordination for those people that get their private plumbers to do what we would consider things that we shouldn't be doing for them, or that sewer lateral.
Well, John, or Joe, that you mentioned that the in-home work is going to be enough to keep plumbers busy.
Well, I agree.
And that's
but
where
that sewer
a lot
lateral-
of your lead comes from.
But the sewer lateral probably have to be done by them as it is now.
But this is all open trench, Scott?
No,
Not always. There are a couple of contractors in town that are pulling services or
pushing.
burst systems or.
Mr. Robinson?
So is the issue for the commission to sort of set a goal of when we would want lead service lines, updated? And if that's it, do we want to pick a time certain? Do we want to say 12 years, 15 years, by 20?
And tell us how we're getting there?
2035, and then leave it to you to develop the implementation plan?
Yeah, you can certainly do that, and then we could see if, you know, what's realistic to get to meet that point, you know?
Depends on funding too, doesn't it?
Well, if the mandate's coming down from the feds, is it funding or is it, I think we can then push for funding. That can drive our strategy, but if we have a goal, if we're truly concerned about public health and welfare, we know that lead lines are a source of lead for children, do we want to try to articulate a goal of 15 years from today that we would want to have all lead service lines lead-free, and to develop a plan to achieve that? And it would include working with our congressional delegation, state delegation, obtaining the safe drinking water funding, et cetera. But we want to start out with a goal.
Is that a motion?
I would move that we establish a goal of replacing all lead service lines in 15 years.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
Got a second. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Jean.
I don't disagree with setting a goal because it sets how we would proceed, but I still think there's some unknowns in with regard to funding. So if we set that goal, of course, we could change the goals, so it's not the end of the world either. I'd still like to know more, so I'm kind of reluctant to do that. That doesn't mean I wouldn't do that at the next meeting, okay? Support it.
I'm happy bringing it back at the next meeting. Give you a chance to think about it.
Maybe I should say it this way, whenever staff is able to bring back additional information.
So it could be that we would like that goal, and we're looking for what does the plan in order to reach that look like from staff? And, I mean, is a month enough time to kind of?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly bring this back, even if it's just for an update, to see where we're at. I guess, yeah, so if we're looking at a 15-year goal, I guess, we could take a look and finalize some numbers and then maybe also get some additional feedback from other communities as well, that we might have and see how we're comparing, so, yeah.
So I would modify the motion to direct staff to bring us back. Plan
For 15-year goal?
for 15 years.
Okay.
Yep,
Is
I'm okay with that.
Is that, okay,
Second.
we are okay with this, Mr. Jean? Yeah, okay. All those in favor of having staff come back to us with a 15-year replacement plan for lead laterals can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Yes, Mr. Jean.
Just for the record, I think we shouldn't be leaving the message that, obviously, having the lead is a potential risk. But based on our testing, we are not, that's not totally true that the lead service lines are causing the lead in, because our tests show that it isn't. Is that fair? Scott, maybe you want to qualify that, but I don't want to leave the message, it's a scare tactic either.
No, for lead lines, we do have very low lead results. In fact, most of our, we had higher lead results from copper lines with lead solder in the city with our treatment. So not as a scare tactic, but no amount of lead is a good amount of lead is the motto, so.
Okay. All right, we are now moving on to item number 6, discussion and possible action on 2021 water and wastewater CIP projects.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. We are getting into our capital budget season to update our 5-year capital plan, and typically before staff dives into that really heavy, we take a look at our current year on where we're at. We're getting close to mid-year, and really what we plan are we going to be within our budget on what was approved? Are we going to exceed it? And right now, with the projects that we've bid out and the projects that we plan to continue on through 2021, both on the water and wastewater, we're within budget or below on what's been approved. So I wanted to provide you with the updates on really what we're looking at. On the wastewater side, we still have some engineering studies and stuff we have to bid out for the lift stations. We still have our force main access points on the industrial park lift station, and then we also have the cleaning yet to do this year. But those projects are moving forward. Our street projects have been bid out. We had 2nd Street from Short to DeKalb, which was approved, but the council had changed where those CDBG funds were going, and now it's going to be on McIntosh Street. So we're still trying to finalize those costs on the sewer side. So those may be up or down depending on the final decision and what we find. So on the sewer side, again, on our SIP lining projects, our cast in place, we televised, Dave was here, I think it's 2,000, 3,000 feet of 24 and 30 inch interceptor line. That's where we're going to focus our slip lining this year, is on a lot of hydrogen sulfide decay and stuff in the concrete pipe. And so we're trying to finalize those estimates and those specifications and get that out for bid this year. Let's see. On the water side, we made a few adjustments. Obviously, with the purchase of 1010 Bugbee Avenue, which was approved by the city council, we're moving forward with that. We're able to find that within our capital budget on some other things that we're either not going to do or we reduce the costs of. What else did we, any other major changes, Scott, that you remember at this point?
No, I think we just took some reductions and put them towards the purchase of the property, and then maybe reallocated some funds towards that Elm Street line item.
Right, okay, yep, that's right. For that Elm Street water main there, that old steel, that spiral steel pipe, there's some development and stuff going on there, so we wanted to, yeah, before we make any more connections on that line, so. I don't know, was this one on for discussion, Mayor? Yeah, or, I guess it was on for possible action. I don't know that I necessarily need possible action, but if there's anything that you have questions on specific for any of these projects, we'll run through each one.
Mr. Jean?
I'd like to, I wasn't able to read it online, so I'd like to review it in paper.
Yeah.
And secondly, if you do 2,000 feet of that larger interceptor pipe, it would cost $200 a foot. And I don't know the numbers. I know that we're paying around $30 for 8-inch. So, if that's the case, then I hope it's that kind of number so we can get that work done on those interceptors that are failing like that.
Yeah, right now, I think we're getting budget numbers about $180 a foot, so I think we're within that, Joe.
If I was going to, I would suggest we carry this over for a future meeting.
Sure.
Okay, yeah,
Yep.
that sounds great.
And I will be bringing the 5-year capital plan back as well, so, and I will show 2021 on there, you know, but we'll go out to 26, so.
All right, I guess we are ready to move on. Item number 7, discussion and possible action on disconnection of water main booster station serving the village of Maine, former Brokaw area.
So I gave a very short memo on this, that the village of Maine has full startup on their water supply, and so they're serving the old area of Brokaw at this point in time. So we've, you know, basically shut the valve and the booster station and stuff down, and giving them a couple weeks or you know, just to make sure that they don't have any significant issues or anything. But we do plan on moving in and doing a hard disconnect on that line, because it's about 3-mile stretch of line, Scott. And we don't want to be connected to a 3-mile dead-end line. There's also a potential there too that Scott's going to be working with an engineering firm to take a look to see if those pumps can be relocated to another booster station where we may be able to use that and save some money and not have to purchase everything new on a booster station. The Monroe, right? The one on Monroe, yeah. That we've had on the capital list here for a few years anyway, so, yeah.
Any questions? Mr. Dean?
I never dreamt that that station would become, I mean, under that criteria. The intent was that we would use the station for other things, but we're limited on annexation out there, so I don't envision that that's going to happen. So
Right.
I think this makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
If in the future something happens or changes with the Village of Maine, they're going to have to reinvest in the putting those pumps back in service if that becomes necessary in the connection.
Yep.
So I guess I would entertain a motion. Yes, a motion by Jean,
I would so move to proceed with that.
the disconnection.
Yes, it doesn't have to happen as quick as, I'd like to know more about the pumps, but that's
Sure.
a staff exercise, so.
Okay, we have a motion, second by Robinson. Any discussion here? Okay, I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of moving forward with the disconnection can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, we are now moving on to item number 8, our much-awaited PFAS discussion with Commissioner John Robinson. We have a presentation for you to check out.
So I'll go here, and
Yeah.
Eric can put into the package the publication prepared by Green Fire. Wisconsin Green Fire is a group committed to the conservation ethic and trying to bring science back into discussions on public policy, working with the legislature, state agencies, and the general public. And they've prepared an Opportunities 2.0 paper on PFAS forever chemicals in Wisconsin. If you can go to the next slide. So I'm going to, this will take approximately 12, 15 minutes, if I've got that time. So what are PFAS? PFAS are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances that are long and short chain carbon and fluorine molecules. And they were invented in the 1930s with their first commercial application in 1946 with DuPont using it in Teflon cookware. They're durable chemicals and materials that properties are resistant to oil, water, temperature, chemical, and fire, and they have electrical insulating properties. There's over 5,000 fluorinated compounds that have been developed and are in use today. The strong carbon-fluorine bond makes them difficult to destroy or break down, and therefore they're known as forever chemicals. Next slide. PFAS can be found in many, many areas, including food packaging and processing. A lot of the fast food wrappings that are grease resistant. Microwave popcorn containers are used in cookware, again, Teflon and other coatings. They've been used in commercial products. In the 1950s, they were used in stain and water repellent fabrics, Scotchgard, polishes, waxes, paints, and cleaning products. In the 1960s, out of concern raised by the Department of Navy over fires at combat missions and training exercises, they developed aqueous film-forming foam for fire suppression that led to perfluorooctane acid, PFOA, and perfluorooctane sulfanic acid, PFOSs, which are some of the more common ones that we're seeing in Wisconsin today. In the 1970s, it was expanded to athletic wear, such as Gore-Tex, and surgical gowns, and it's used in chrome plating, oil recovery, and again, electrical devices such as cell phones, tablets, and conductors. Next slide. This is a conceptual site model that was developed by the Michigan Department of Environment and Great Lakes and Energy. It shows the various transport mechanisms through air emissions, through effluent discharges in the wastewater stream, solid waste, and product breakdown. PFASs are found in drinking water, groundwater, and surface water through releases, manufacturing processes, landfill, leachate, wastewater treatment plant, effluent, and biosolids. And it gets into the rainwater through incomplete combustion and air emissions, and resulting in it getting into the soils, and resulting in plant uptake, affecting living organisms such as fish, animals, deer, and humans. Next slide. There are a number of health risks associated with PFAS. They bioaccumulate and biomagnify, thereby increasing toxicity in organisms. They tend to bind to proteins in the liver and blood. Since 1999, the Center for Disease Control's National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey has found up to 12 PFAS in the blood serum of study participants over the age of 12. The CDC has found high levels of PFAS reduce antibody response to vaccines and reduce infectious disease resistance, which is critical during this time of COVID. It's been linked to increased risk of kidney and testicular cancer, thyroid problems, increased levels of cholesterol, Parkinson's disease, bone density issues, and lower birth weight. There have also been concerns expressed relative to health equity and environmental justice, and that many studies indicate that low income and communities of color are more likely to be near PFAS contaminated sites. Next slide. The presence in Wisconsin has led the Department of Natural Resources and Department of Health Services to issue a number of advisories. There are fish consumption advisories in Starkwater Creek and Lake Monona in the Madison area for bluegill, carp, largemouth bass, northern pike, walleye, yellow perch. There are limits on smelt consumption in Lake Superior. The Department of there's a new advisory for Silver Creek around Camp McCoy. The Department of Health Services has issued health advisories for drinking water exceedances at the JCI Tyco site in Marinette and Peshtigo, and there's an interim drinking water advisory in French Island near or in La Crosse, next to the La Crosse airport. Testing found deer liver in the JCI Tyco. Deer liver impacted in the JC Tyco area, resulting in a 5-mile area advisory not to eat the deer liver. Next slide. PFAS are everywhere. They're water soluble and they move easily in the environment. There are over 700 sites across the country. 34 major cities have their drinking water impacted by PFAS. Madison, La Crosse, Rhinelander, and Wisconsin. DHS has estimated that 1/2 of our contact with PFAS comes from our consumption of food or its packaging. A month ago, there were 63 known sites in Wisconsin. There are currently 69. So they're finding more and more sites. Next. This is a site prepared through the Remediation Redevelopment Program site, our sites map. And it shows the locations. You've got Superior, which had the Husky oil refinery fire, Rhinelander, Wells, which are near the airport, La Crosse, French Island, which is near their airport's test burn sites, former landfills, the Yunker landfill in the Hudson area. Many of them are associated with airports and in defense facilities in the state. There's also manufacturing facilities in Manitowoc with the Miro plants in Chilton. And again, some of those landfills, refuse hideaway in Middleton and others. Next slide. There are a number of challenges associated with PFAS. Their prevalence, there are 5,000 chemicals. Even if production were to stop today, the world would live with them forever because their difficulty, they're so strong. They don't break down. The products that they're attached to sometimes break down, but they remain in the environment. And there's been a reduction and shift to shorter chain PFAS. Instead of 8-9 molecules, they're shorter chain, but those still have longevity and still have health concerns. The science over PFAS is emerging in terms of how it affects human health and the environment. They're looking at rates in the parts per trillion. When I started with the DNR in 2000, we were talking parts per million, then it moved to parts per billion, and now it's into parts per trillion, which creates lab certification issues and a number of other issues just from the perspective of sampling. There's a lack of regulations. EPA has been slow to address PFAS. In 2000s, EPA regulated PFAS under the Toxic Substance Control Act. They've got a non-regulatory health advisory for drinking water at 70 parts per trillion. DNR is looking at a rate of, or Department of Health Services recommended a rate of about 20. EPA has issued a lifetime advisory on PFAS. But the lack of federal action resulted in different approaches across the state, and where the U.S. is much farther behind the European Union relative to the regulation of PFAS. But there are different regulatory standards, which makes it difficult for industries to address it. Industry has voiced a number of concerns. The wastewater treatment plants say, we didn't produce it, we're just passing it through. It comes into our influent, it goes in our effluent. Landfills say it's in our leachate, but we didn't generate it. There are concerns relative to the regulations getting ahead of the science, if we don't have good science, but I think that science is emerging. Some have argued that the standards are overly conservative, but they're based upon some of the same risk analysis that other chemicals are. Manufacturers have voluntarily phased out PFOS, one of those firefighting foams in 2002, and they have eliminated emissions for PFOA in 2015. But in Wisconsin, we've seen Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce raise concerns relative to the regulation of PFAS. They opposed provisions of the there was a bill to ban the use of firefighting foam with intentionally added PFAS, and they opposed portions of the bill. They brought a suit or a complaint to stop the DNR from doing sampling at wastewater plants in February of this year. That was settled. The sampling will occur, but the results will not be announced. And they're also challenging the department's ability to regulate PFAS as a regulatory as a hazardous substance. There's no sustainable approach right now for cradle to grave responsibility. No manufacturer is responsible for the life of that product. The cost to remove it is very high. The Department of Defense has over 400 sites. They estimate the cost to clean up is $2 billion. There's no proven safe method for destruction. It's hard to, by nature they're very persistent, and they're heat resistant, fire resistant. Some of their properties, the current practices are to sequester them, to capture them in organic carbon versus destruction. And there are concerns if you do try to burn it, that it will be released into the environment. Next slide. Where is Wisconsin now? The Wisconsin legislature in the last session 2 years ago began regulating or banned the use of Class B firefighting foam with intentionally added PFAS, except under very certain narrow conditions. The speaker created a task force on water quality. They made a number of recommendations, one of which called for the creation of a clean sweep program to get some of the PFAS out of the environment. That was not funded. That's in the governor's budget. The governor issued Executive Order number 40, creating the Wisconsin PFAS Action Council, comprised of 17 state agencies to develop a statewide action plan to prevent future discharges, inventory and minimize exposures, address historic discharges, and educate and communicate about the risk with them. Those 25 recommendations are driving state policy and included and are reflected in some of the policies in the budget. In 2019, DNR's Water Quality and Fisheries program began monitoring a number of water bodies in the water column to test for fish tissue, and that led to a number of the health advisories. In this year, I think right now you're being sampled, your effluent's being sampled at all the wastewater treatment plants. The Department of Health Services proposed groundwater standards in June of 2019 as part of Cycle 10 for 2 of the PFAS compounds at 20 parts per trillion. In 2020, that list was expanded to 16 additional ones. The DNR is in the process of developing rules on setting those up as groundwater standards. DNR has also created a number of stakeholder groups as part of the rulemaking process, and for individual sites in Marinette, in French Island, they've created a PFAS External Advisory Committee to provide guidance. Melissa Johnson and I are both members of that PFAS advisory body, and there are a number of other activities. Next slide. The governor's budget called for a number of initiatives relating to PFAS, including funding for 11 positions in the DNR to develop policy related to PFAS and implement the PFAS action plan. They're proposing $2 million for statewide monitoring and testing for PFAS, including wastewater, drinking water, public water supply systems, fish, tissues, water, surface water. They propose to create a $10 million annual fund for a grant for municipalities for testing and remediation of PFAS by local units of government, and $1 million in the first year of the biennium for that clean sweep program to remove firefighting foam that contains PFAS. And then also there's an effort to try to expedite the development of standards. Next. Wisconsin Green Fire, he put together a work group, and Melissa and I are part of that, along with Tom Giroux from Rylander, Jim Ballman from La Crosse, and people from Madison, Sarah Peterson, our science director, and Fred Clark, our director, but they all contributed to developing and making a number of recommendations. They including trying to prioritize the identification of PFAS exposure and releases across the state. We think that all public water supplies should be testing for PFAS. They should be analyzing the influent, effluent, and biosolids of municipalities and industrial wastewater treatment facilities. Why that is important, that's an issue affecting this group, both the water quality as well as the effluent. If we have PFAS that are going through our plant and we capture those in the biosolids and we land spread those, we become an arranger when that is land spread. And there is a potential for liability going forward. We also are encouraging that rules be developed as soon as possible. There's also the desire and the recommendation that they manage PFAS contamination and devise cleanup procedures for PFAS-containing media. We're still evolving the science on how to treat it, sequester it, capture it, and prevent it from being released. There's also a recommendation to control sources of PFAS and identify methods to reduce exposure. The Clean Sweep program, looking for other ways to remove it. And then one of the other things is to educate the public on the environmental impacts, but making consumers more knowledgeable about PFAS-containing products, assist them to become better consumers, and then we also are encouraging the state to host a summit on sharing information and research on PFAS, because that's just not available. The final slide is that we support evidence-based environmental standards for drinking water, groundwater, and surface water, including for biosolid applications, solid waste, again, dealing with how's it getting into the environment and trying to develop those standards. We encourage the use of the emergency rulemaking process, and there's a critical need for additional research to be done. That's a very, not so quick, but quick overview of PFAS. And the issue isn't going away, and it's one that we as commissioners will probably be faced with at some point in time, hopefully not in our drinking water, but potentially. What they're finding is the PFAS, there's a lot of the PFAS releases that have been associated with airports. The federal government required the use of the aqueous forming foam at airports for fire suppression because it's so effective. But they found that that's gotten into the water supply, and it's suspected in Rylander where the wells in Peshtigo, it's a JCI Tyco site, manufactures and tests it there. At La Crosse, it was the burn pit next to the wells. I don't think that we've done that at Wausau Municipal Airport, but I think there are concerns at other places. But it's also gotten into other products that break down over time. And, if you're using a Gore-Tex rainwear, the rainwear may persist, but the PFAS may persist, but the rainwear may break down, and as the Teflon comes off, it may get into the environment, and those are the concerns. So, any questions?
Thank you for that.
Good report, John.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we're moving on to item number 9, discussion and possible action regarding offer of settlement by Dean Prohaska, of A&D Contractors LLC, tenant of Brownfield Investments LLC, to resolve a tax settlement received by the city from Marathon County for forfeitures levied against 909 South 60th Avenue. Is there anything that we can talk about in open session that you would suggest, Attorney Jacobson?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mayor. The only thing I would add to what you read is it was for tax settlements received for the years 2018 and 2019.
Okay. I guess with that, I would be looking for a motion or for somebody on this body to read the closed session information. Yes, Ms. Herbst. Yes, I actually need you to read all of the language under 10, and you might need to turn your microphone on too. Thank you.
Closed session pursuant to section 19.85, paragraph 1, sub G, Wisconsin stats for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, regarding offer of settlements to resolve potential litigation by Dean Prohaska, DBA A&D Contractors, LLC, Tenant of Brownfield Investments, LLC, to resolve tax settlement received by city from Marathon County for forfeitures levied against 909 South 60th Avenue.
All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Jean. I think I need to take a roll call. So Robinson? Force?
Yes.
Herbst?
Aye.
Jean?
Aye.
And Rosenberg, aye. All right, thank you. We will go into closed session. I guess we'll go in the Maple Room. Yeah. All right, we are back in open session. And I guess at this point, we're on item number 11. Do I have anyone with a, yes, Mr. Robinson?
I would move that the commission reimburse Marathon County for the amount that they have forwarded to the city for special assessments,
Okay,
and that we accept the settlement offer of $5,000 contingent upon receipt of that payment within 30 days.
okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Herbst. Any discussion here? Yes, Mr. Jean?
I'll just simply say, if the legal part can't get resolved in the 30 days, maybe we should make it a little longer stretch, 60 days, or, and how do you feel
I
about
think
the
we can get it resolved in 30.
Okay.
Thank you for asking, though, I appreciate it.
All those in favor of accepting the motion to repay the county and accept settlement can signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Okay, we are now on the last item, adjourn. So consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you.